Uh, welcome to the Finance Committee meeting for Monday, October 29th, 2018. So we have Melanie here from the Cross Insurance Arena, so why don't we start with that? I think we did talk about the sheriff's, that we said we would discuss the sheriff's budget as well this evening. But where Melanie's here, we'll start with her.
Sure. And I'll just open up and just say that Melanie is joining us this evening because the Cross Insurance Arena budget is put together a little bit differently than your standard governmental budget. And I thought it would be beneficial for her to come and to do a brief presentation about the philosophy or methodology in developing such a budget and answering any questions that you may have around that budget. Because a lot of times what drives the budget is revenues, and how we get revenues into the arena is booking of acts. And Melanie will go down through that spreadsheet that's within your packet. I think it's page 2 of your packet. Talks about or shows the different types of acts and how that works out. So I won't talk anymore. I will pass it off to Melanie if she's willing to take us through this packet of information.
Absolutely. So on page 2, that's going to be the best page to kind of get the overall concept of how we budget our events at the arena. And starting the top 2 lines, and basically kind of the way we look at it are repeat events, events that have booked a couple of years out that you guys are familiar with. Some of those would be the high school basketball tournament. There are certain events that we know are going to be there each year. Hockey is also one of those. So this year we knew going into it, those first 2 lines, we were budgeting for 36 regular hockey games, and then we also budgeted for 1 postseason hockey game. So hopefully we will get to that postseason play. We've got to get a little more game time under our belts to get there. And then indoor arena football falls under the same concept as hockey as well. We know that they're going to play 8 games in their season, so that's why we include those in our budget. Last year, those since that was a new tenant for us, that was us looking at other facilities that had the same product in their building to come up with our projections of the budget. This year, obviously, we're looking at our historicals from the previous year. And then moving on down, college hockey, that's something that will usually pop up for us. We usually get a UMaine hockey game under our belts. And so we know some of these, as I said, are pre-existing. High school basketball, that's going to be one of them. Last year, we had the American East College tournament here. This year, they were not returning, and so that's why you see a 0 in that category. Disney shows for us, I call them kindly repeat offenders. You will see Disney on Ice here usually several years, and I say that in the kindest of terms. I love having those guys in the building. But Disney on Ice and Sesame Street, those are going to be the family shows that we know are going to be in the building. They'll usually book several years out. I think I've already got them on the booking calendar for 2020. So those help come up with our budget numbers. Miscellaneous family shows will also fall into that category. Other sports, such as the annual wrestling tournament that we have, most of these are pre-existing for us. Monster Trucks, WWE, Globetrotters. The 2 lines that I would probably say most of our conversations surround upon are going to be the major and minor concerts for us. So major and minor concerts are in the category, we have 2 budgeted for those, and then for the minor concerts we have 7. So those are not pre-existing events for us. Those are not going into our budgeted year. Those are not, I can't look at Jim and say, hey, I have contracts signed for these concerts. Those are going to be based on our projections of what we have historically done. And I think that's, as we have kind of gone along through the years, it's been a learning curve. I think the industry has kind of changed. What was happening 10 years ago is not happening now. There are also other venues that we're competing with, not just location-wise, but in terms of what the expenses are going to be that a promoter pays for us is going to be different for another building. So for us, the 2 major concerts Right now, we already have those categories filled. We booked those. And one little thing side note that I want to say is just because it's called a major concert does not mean it's an actual concert. A comedy show can fall into that category for us. It's based on what makes one show fall into one category versus another is the net revenues that you're going to see at the end of the day. So if it's $37,000 or below, it will be a minor concert for us, and if it's $49,000 and above, then we would consider that a major. And kind of what I'm seeing as we've gone along, there are certain names that I thought, oh, they're definitely in the major category for us, and then as it's kind of sold, I've actually had a minor concert end up selling a little bit better than a major one. And so it's like, okay, well, technically the name, it might be a little flip-flop for me as to where I place them in the category, but it's all kind of based on the projections going into the budget year. So I think that those two lines are the hot items, I would say, that we are kind of always trying to figure out how to best budget the building for. It's not a guaranteed for us. And then PBR, that's the same. The PBR is going to be one of those repeat offenders. They generally will come. I've already started to have talks to them about 2019 play. So for most of the conversations that I'm having before we start to plan the budget in January, I can get an idea of most of these. The convention centers, the conventions and the trade shows will generally fall into that category. Banquets and meetings, we have a couple of, Cross Insurance actually has their Christmas party, so there are a couple that we know are generally going to happen, but there will also be some meetings that pop up. So we work with the visitor center here in Portland, and a lot of times they will get inquiries about needing meeting spaces. The Holiday Inn also will sometimes book an event and say, hey, we actually had an influx of the number of people that registered. Do you guys have an extra room that we can use as a meeting space? So the banquets and the meetings fall into that category. Religious is Jehovah's. So Jehovah's, again, they're one of those, I have dates held for them 5 years out. So I know that they're going to be somebody that comes back. Graduations, the kids got to keep graduating, so those guys will always be on the booking calendar. And then the community and charity event and other miscellaneous, for the most part, those are general projections. Those are not guaranteed. They kind of fall into the same category revenue as the major and minor concerts. So the two categories, the major and the minor concerts, those revenues are not guaranteed at the end of the day. When I'm putting the budget together, it's generally based on projections. I don't know if I realized that was a lot all at once, but do you have any questions? I'll take a break and you can kind of hit me with some questions.
One thing that I wanted to throw out is that this budget actually started July 1st of this year. So acts that you may be seeing coming into the center, I just saw a bus drive by before we started that had the Jeff Dunham comedy show, which I think is in March, already being displayed as a wrap on the Metro bus. As Melanie is talking about all these shows, she is actively trying to piece those shows into this current budget. Hockey's underway, and we have a concert I think was it a minor concert?
Saturday, yep.
Mercy Me is this Saturday.
It
so
is,
that would fall in
and that
minor.
one's that's actually sold really well, and it's about 200 tickets from selling out, and another thing that will also impact the revenue for us is the deal structure. There is a promoter that we will oftentimes deal with, and the revenues at the end of the day get split 3 different ways. There's 3 different people that are bringing production pieces, bringing the talent to the table, and so the revenue is not split 50-50. So it's great that I get to work with them, but I know at the end of the day, just because it's a huge name, You can have the Elton Johns of the world. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will fall into a major category for me based on my deal structure with the promoter. So that's another kind of little tidbit to know for us, is how is the deal structure that is going to base kind of what the revenues I see at the end of the day.
Is that part of what your job is? You
Yes.
negotiate the
It
deal?
is, yes. Mhm.
So we're what, third of the way through the year, really?
I think one of the things that I've found over the years looking at this is the things that one would think would be profitable and the things one would think would not be profitable are very different than one might expect. And it's why, I always joke about the Disney on Ice, and we make that like Disney on Ice. If that was 365 days a year, we'd be doing great. As opposed to, the hockey team, as much as there's a lot of noise about that, that's not a profit center. It's interesting to take note of that, and Elton John wasn't.
Right. Yeah. And there are, some of it is dependent on the deal structure that I have. Some of it also depends on the expenses that I could see. There is a comedian that came through within the last year, and he was also, while he was on tour, he was working on creating a movie. And part of his acts were going to be utilized in that movie. So it was very important to him that none of the patrons in the building utilized their cell phone at all to be able to record any of the acts. And you think, how can you even attempt such a request with kind of how the culture is today? And it's with security. So what we would have normally seen for his show, if we would have normally seen $40,000 for security. And when I say security, not only is it the ticket scanners, kind of the people, the guest services staff welcoming you into the building, it's the security that you have backstage. That show is $80,000, and that's $80,000 on top of whatever other expenses I have. So it's kind of like each show that comes in is kind of their own beast. So it's, what is the deal structure? Are there any outside expenses that are kind of unique to that specific show? So I think that kind of goes into what Alex is saying. They're kind of their own beast when they come into town, and it's, we're trying to meet those needs, which we certainly can, but that definitely comes into play with the revenue that you see.
So are you experienced enough so that you can spot the deals?
Let me tell you something. I've been around the guys who've been doing it for 30 years, and I really wish some of their crystal ball stuff could rub off on me.
Well, I mean, you can look at, for example, it's counterintuitive. Elton John would be great, and you go, oh, you're going to get a full house and all that, but then he's got a lot of people around him. They kind of siphon off money. I mean, is that you're experienced in that? I mean, you could say Elton John, or you pick something else that everybody would kind of go, what? But you take the other one to fill the date.
Absolutely. If you
go purely on profit, what we would.
Yeah, if you asked me to go purely on profit, I probably would not. I hate to keep using his name if this ever goes on public record. I really hate to use a high-end artist like that. But there are certain shows that if you asked me to pick one or the other, I would ask one that is more moderately priced in terms of tickets, because I know the extra money that the consumer has, they're going to come in and then they're going to be willing to spend it elsewhere. Yeah. So there is definitely, and that's one of the things that I like particularly about our company, is we have a booking call that all the general managers have to be on in the company. So not only do you learn about the foot traffic that's going on in the industry, and you know what the other buildings are doing, but we also talk about the different deals, the good, the bad. If somebody had, if somebody tanked and a show tanked, you talk about why. And so as far as that sort of experience, that is probably one of the things that I love about a corporate company. I think there are good and bad things, but that is one of the things, that you have limitless resources with really savvy people. And so that's definitely one of the things. They've met my boss, Chris, and Chris is very good about challenging me to, go after different shows, but he will absolutely question me as to why I'm going after a certain show if he doesn't think like, hey, it's a good fit. And so, yeah, so it's definitely, my first boss told me this is not a rocket science position. It is very much an experience-based position. And so that's why anybody that knows me in the company will always say, oh, don't be afraid to ask questions. And I'm like, oh, don't worry, because I have your number, and they've started to learn that I will absolutely call and reach out and that sort of thing. So,
Now, do you work with the group here to kind of determine what sorts of events come through?
Absolutely, yep. So when I get one that, so a risk show for us, or what we call a co-pro show, is if there's a pot of money and you and I are going to split it 50-50, then I'm going to put a P&L together, and I shoot it to my boss, Chris, but then Jim also has to get the approval of it. And so he'll absolutely ask questions. Hey, do you think this is a good fit for the market? Do you think that this ticket price is too high? And so we have those dialogues absolutely about what's coming into town.
Jim, is that different than, I know that the structure changed quite a bit in the last year, so that group you now have, you have more influence in what goes on in those conversations than you did in the past.
I do have a say.
And that does make a difference here?
It does. I think, a lot of times when I raise a question, Melanie comes back and says, I've talked to my staff and we've got the same questions and we're not feeling so good. And while Melanie was just talking, it was just about a month and a half ago, we got I thought was a terrific P&L, but it was just, it was way out of whack. It was two comedians, very big names in the comedians. It would have been terrific to have here at the Cross Insurance Arena. It was just too rich. And when you have ticket prices that kind of exceed our market, you got to shy away from those. And, I raised that question, and Melanie's like, we're already down the road. We can't do this for this market. And so they're not grabbing everything that's coming to town. There is definitely a weighted process. A lot of people have input on it.
And this is really your office's first go-around this year of having this kind of input, correct?
Yes.
I mean, before it was totally separate.
Yep.
And that's working, you're 4 months into it, so you're really early into the whole process.
The communication between Melanie's office and my office is seamless. We're texting, we're emailing, we're on the phone. I'm up there. I make a presence up there. At least I try once a week just to pick up mail that might be needing to come down here and just check in with people. But, it's a tight ship up there, and I think as we have gone through a lot of turbulent times with the center over the last 10 or 15 years, I think it's very stable ground right now.
Well, the bottom line here, and from our perspective, is that you're looking at higher revenues, significantly higher this year over.
Well, that's what happens when you bring two anchor tenants in. When you have a hockey team coming back in for 36 games, and now you got an arena football that was on no one's radar until last January.
There's the difference right there, huh? That's the difference in the two budgets, I mean, roughly, those two.
Largely.
Yeah, you went from 80 events to 122. And so that's not just the ticket sales, that's your ancillary revenues, that's your concessions, your merch, that sort of thing, yeah.
Do you have a number for your 122? Do you have like a maximum number that you're working with in terms of what you could actually go to?
Well, we have 365 days, although I think my staff would probably hate me, but, it's, it's definitely a good problem to have. I got an email today asking, and promoters, when they're putting a tour together, they might be looking at a 4-month spread, and so they'll say, hey, send me your available dates, April through whatever, and I sent an email today, and I thought, gosh, April is almost full, and then I thought, oh, that's a really good problem to have, because we are busy, we're getting foot traffic, that sort of deal. So that's...
Well, I'm out of Freeport, and we just had a discussion about having a couple of events in one night in August, in one day in August, and we actually, the mindset was that, well, because the local police take care of the business, we can't actually have two events in one day, two good-sized events, and the question was, well, so what do? We tell someone they can't come for one day? If they want to bring 5,000 people in and you can't do that? That's not really a good approach. So So we actually worked it out, and that kind of that mindset was shifted a little bit, based on let's make some other arrangements for security. Basically, it was a security issue. They couldn't cover both things. So,
Gotcha.
But I mean, that's the kind of, that's kind of discussion I'm sure that you guys are having too, but it's, so 365 days, if you could do anything like that, that would be quite an amazing thing.
Some of your transitions, though.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah,
that
it
was
was
something.
bad. You're looking at Madison, I mean, that's Madison Square Garden. That's I mean, they truly are 365 days a year. So I would have I'd have to hire some more people.
Well,
Just like, not this past weekend, the weekend before, there was a Friday night hockey game. Saturday, WWE was in the rink, and so there was a changeover there. And then Sunday, we had hockey again.
So,
So it was a very busy
You
weekend.
can do this. You can, I mean, we had, I can remember as a kid that the Nordica Theater, it's now a bigger name in Freeport, but it was, when I was a kid, it was a small theater, and I worked at it. And part of my job was they had to do a quick turnover, because Saturday night you do the Nordica Theater, you do the movies, you have the popcorn and the gum and all the candy and all that. Sunday morning, the Catholic Church would come in and have mass.
Yeah.
So he kind of had to switch gears pretty hard.
That's what they're.
So that's kind of,
Yes.
so all this stuff can be done. It's just,
Absolutely, yes.
It's the organization.
If you have the bodies to put towards it, it's shocking what the major arenas can do. To go from a dirt event to a nice event to basketball to, so it's, if you have the manpower, they can become quite seamless at it and really do it very quickly. It's kind of crazy.
All right, so do you want to go through a little bit more, or is this?
I certainly
would you
can
like
if you
to-
guys.
you were saying that you're part of the,
Yes, I
so you know this
serve on the
budget.
board.
You
Yes.
know this budget inside and out. I mean, that's your,
Well,
Just
your
your
budget.
operating
Yeah.
budget.
You're on the board.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
I haven't really had a chance to look at the operating budget, but basically I'm a total numbers guy here, which is, and I think I mentioned that last time, that, I look at where you're, what the big picture is in terms of what are you doing. You seem to be going in a really good direction here. And last year, it was very disconcerting about how much we were bleeding out of this whole, the whole arena. Well, it looks right now that you've done a really good turnaround.
And let me say, to be honest about how the entire process works, is when the buildings are on the fiscal year the way that we are, January is when we will really kind of know what the foot traffic for the rest of the budget year is going to look like. So of the 7 minor concerts that I have budgeted, if I know, hey, I've only solidified 5, I'm having conversations about 1 more, and I'll have a feel as to whether or not I think it's going to happen. I may know at that point we might need to pull 2 out of the rolling forecast because I don't know that we're going to get there. So January and February is when you will know, when buildings will really kind of start to be able to get a pulse of the foot traffic for the rest of the year. So, I mean, that's when we start working on the budget for the next year, but that's when, for this one, when Chris will really be pushing me to take a hard look at what I'm rolling, and really where I think, the cards will fall, because as I said, those major and minor concerts, those are, those are projections going into it. So January is when, when our board meetings, those will be when the conversations start happening as to where the cards will end up falling.
Well, it's kind of, we're not participating at that point. We're kind of out of it. But, and I know that you've only been at it a while, and we're only a third of the way through. But what do you think? How's it looking for the year?
No, I think I'm encouraged by it. So of the 7 that we have budgeted, I've got 4 locked down right now, 4 that I know are going to happen. The 2 majors are already locked in as well. So I know that I've got some ground to cover with the other 3, and we've been putting offers in on some of them. And I tell Jim all the time, I'm like, booking is like fishing. The more lines you have in the water, the more opportunities of catching a fish that you have. So we've got several lines in the water right now, which is great. I just don't know which line is going to get hit. If that's probably my best analogy that I have of it. Some of it is strategy, and then some of it there is a little bit of luck to it, as far as where the tours are routing. Are they even coming through the Northeast? That sort of thing. So So I feel good about it. I think that the last three, I think those will be a push, but I think that it's definitely very doable in the next couple of months. So I'm still seeing emails come across my plate about tours, picking up shows, that sort of thing.
And just to give you a little backdrop through the budget process that typically happens between March and June of this past year, some of the large, major and minor concerts that the trustees had some concerns with. The initial budget that they received had 4 major concerts and 8 minor concerts. The trustees thought that would be terrific, but wanted to budget a little more conservatively and asked Melanie to go back and work with her staff to bring forward something that might be a little scaled back down. And so Melanie brought back for final consideration of by the trustees and ultimately the commissioners, 2 majors and 7 minors. And so that's where we stand today. So just to give you, there is a back and forth process. There's not only 9 trustees looking at this budget, then it gets recommended off to the 5 commissioners, and the 5 commissioners ultimately approve the budget in the 1st of June. But I wanted to make mention to that it's just not a rubber stamp process. There was a lot of give and take, a lot of discussion with Melanie and her staff throughout the budget process, and asked them to report back with a little bit more scaled back, a little more conservative budget than what was originally proposed.
That seems wise to me.
Do you mind if I jump in? I have a question
Yes.
I'm just straight up curious about. How has non-World Series Mariners attendance been so far? I know there's been a couple that
Yes,
were...
the World Series, we can't compete with
Yeah,
Boston.
that's
Yeah, that's
accepting those
hard.
nights.
We had to accept those nights. So the first night they had 4,500 in attendance, and then the second round they had a little over 2,000, and then the next 2 games we saw 1,600 and 900. One was a Wednesday night game. The other one you had the Boston Red Sox game. And it's funny because I was talking to Adam. Adam is the VP of the business side of hockey, and he has been involved in hockey organizations for a while, and he said, I absolutely hate October games. He's like, because it's not quite cold enough to drive people inside. People really haven't gotten into the hockey mindset. And he said, but once you get into November, it's great. And he said, I have consistently, like the past 3 or 4 years, drawn a Wednesday night hockey game, and he said, it just hurts my heart anytime I have a Wednesday night hockey game in October. So they're good. They're definitely, I think for them, their staff, the first game was more of a production learning curve from them. Just in terms of the timeliness of the music and the horn and just kind of those finer things, refining. But as far as, as far as the attendance, I mean, Adam, he gets scared about it because he's been seeing the October numbers, but I feel like November, December, I definitely think you're going to have a draw for it. So, and especially if they keep winning. So, obviously we would have loved a win on that first home opener, but they've got 2 under their belt, and so no, it's good.
And October is almost gone.
It's almost gone. I know. That's what I told Adam. I said, you've got to ride the wave. But the Wednesday night hockey game, that one, we had like 963 people in the building. So.
No, and that was also competing with... You were toast.
Yeah,
You had no
pretty
chance.
Yeah.
Did you get those 900?
It's sort of like the football games when you have those gorgeous nights. It's
Oh,
just-
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so and the team has not been skating together that long.
Correct.
So
Exactly. Yes.
They're
So
learning
it's a new group.
each other's strengths and
Yes.
weaknesses in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is what we were seeing with arena football towards the end. Like
Mm-hmm.
the guys, they just kind of hit their stride and they started clicking and firing together. So I know that those guys will get there. But, when you're looking at the numbers, that doesn't always ease your nerves.
Yeah,
Anything else? I mean, obviously, if you want to take it and look at it, and then bring questions next week, because I think that an answer,
Sure.
or send them to Jim, and
Yeah.
then he'll forward them to Melanie for anything that you've got.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If you want, we could take a few minutes and just go down through the operational budget.
Sure, let's
you wanna do
just
that, we can just-
yes.
We got some time here.
Just, quick.
Maybe not every single budget sheet, because it does get broken out into many different cost centers.
Sure,
But I think
you know, an overview
a
would be great.
30,000-foot overview of operations would be beneficial.
I'm gonna just stay on.
Page 1, is that what you're talking about?
Page 1.
Is that
Stay
the
on that one, just run down through that. and-
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just do the 12 months that we're in right now. So the number of events, as I mentioned, was the 122 events. And then total paid, 221,000. The average ticket price is $23. And then the general attendance is 275,000. The concession per caps is $8.20, and then the novelties are $1. And again, those are going to be heavily based on the events that we've had repeatedly in the past. And then gross ticket revenue, 5.1 million. And then, also, let me say that our budget is generally broken up into kind of 3 different spaces, which is highlighted there. You've got your rental income, your ancillary revenue, and then your indirect expenses. So your rental income is going to be your gross ticket revenue, the 5.1 million. And then you'll have net rent income of $520,000, and it leaves you with your direct event income of $216,000. So your direct event income is going to be the income that you have got after you've taken out all of your expenses from actually running the event. So what we have to pay for the cleaning, for any of the staffing that we have brought on. So that would be your direct event income. Your suite revenue is $1,300, and then the surcharge or the facility fee revenue is $254,000, and then those ticket convenience fees that Jim was asking me about, purchasing tickets. When you get to purchase at home, the convenience of purchasing at home has a cost to it, so that's those ticket convenience fees, so that's your total revenue of $415,000.
What do you mean at home? You mean the consumer?
Yep, so if you're purchasing online,
Wow,
yep,
that's
or
a- That's a
online.
big number.
It is, and that's if you purchase online, and that's what Jim and I were just discussing. He asked me, he said, is it cheaper to come into the box office to purchase? And I said, yes, because you're not hit with the convenience fees that people are given when they're purchasing at the computer or over the phone. So do know that as a side note, if you're purchasing tickets, go into the box office. It's kind of a pain, but it will be cheaper if you're purchasing in bulk tickets particularly. And then your ancillary incomes are going to be your concession and novelty income. And so you're looking at $838,000 for concession, and then novelty is $30,000 on that. So your total ancillaries that you'll see is $868,000. So our event operating income combines the rental and the ancillaries, which gets you to the 1.5 million. And then moving below other income, you've got your advertising, sponsorships, naming rights, PSLs, and then other rentals, which is an additional $716,000. So all of that above are just going to be revenues that we can get. And then below our indirect expenses are just going to be the cost of running the building. For operations is probably going to be the biggest piece of that that you'll see, obviously, on any of the buildings. So the indirect expenses, is going to be broken down into each individual department beyond this sheet. You'll be able to see the expenses on those.
When you put ice into a building and you need to keep that ice 24/7, it gets very costly.
The utility bills can.
Has that changed at all? Meaning, are there ways to significantly impact that cost these days with ice, an ice arena, versus, when they were last here, the hockey team? I'm just wondering if there's been any efficiencies in the industry in taking care of ice.
Not necessarily, probably efficiencies with equipment.
Yeah.
And in the capital plan that Melanie and her team has put together over the last couple of years, they do have a new piece of equipment, I think in year 3 of that capital plan, which is a brine unit for the chilling of the ice. And so anytime you swap out old equipment with new equipment, you bring in a level of efficiency that
Right.
didn't exist 10 years ago when it was put
But
in.
not actually the storage of ice or the life cycle of ice or anything like that.
One thing that we'll experience is that the arena is going through a lighting upgrade right now. And so the metal halides are being taken down that have been up there for a number of years, and LEDs are being put up. And so we will probably see, especially turning those things on for 36 hockey games, plus
be
the other
significant.
events, we'll see a decrease in the electrical year over year.
There's a process of, a heating pump process. I don't know what your system is for making ice and keeping the ice, keeping the ice cold and all that, but there are, efficiencies in those systems is what I'm thinking is where you get your best bang for the buck if you're, looking at that at some time in the near future.
Yep. Chillers and brines and.
Yeah.
That's on the radar for
Save a
replacement.
significant amount of money on electricity doing that. But the LED lights too. Really.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same concept as going from the halogens to the LED lights. If you get a new brine unit in there, I mean, ours is from the 70s, so there absolutely been advances in the technology. And so, yeah, we'll definitely see, definitely see some impact on the utilities when we get a new brine unit in there. So that'll be.
And the county commissioners moved forward that LED lighting project, because I think that was either in year 2 or year 3, as we're in year 1 right now.
Yeah.
And they saw the value of changing out the lighting. over
Well,
there. They moved
the
it
savings
forward.
are so significant that it's hard to pass on it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We have I work in an industry, wastewater, and, it's high intensive use of electricity. And we've gone from just changing out equipment, modernizing equipment has actually paid for the project. And in addition to that, we use a geothermal system that creates not just heat, but cools. And that's what I was thinking about with the ice, if you could come up with a system like that. Also paid for itself. So you actually throw no new money at it, you actually pay for it. The upgrade pays for itself. So we've been fortunate that way. So I'm just suggesting you might want to look at some of those things, just for cost analysis.
Oh, I'm all in agreement with that. Jim knows, I'll put it in the capital budget. So, so we've almost got the lighting done, so we've got.
Yeah, that's great, that's really.
Other project, yes.
You're gonna notice an incredible difference in
Yes,
that.
no, it'll be great, not only for the utility bills, but then it just changes it changes a lot of things to be able to do instant on, instant off. The halogens take a total of, it's about 7 minutes. Well, you have to, when you turn them off, there's a cooling period. And so from the time you flip the switch to turn them off to get them back up and running, it's usually like 11 to 12 minutes. And
When will that be done? When will that be completed?
oh, it's done right now.
Right now.
Yeah, literally.
It's being done now, or it's
It
done?
is, yep, I let the electrician in the building this morning, so they've been in for a couple of weeks.
Excellent.
Yes, so no, it's exciting, and then, you can do color lighting and that sort of thing. So there's some in-game elements that we're excited for, but in emergency situations, if I instantly need to have lights on, I don't have to wait for them to warm up, but they're there, so it's good for a lot of things.
Well, if there are any other questions on that, please feel free to shoot us questions, email, we'll report back at the next meeting, however you would like to do that. Before we move off topic, I'd like to just point to the last page of your packet. That last page is, we actually have 2 budgets. We have 2 budgets for the cross insurance arena. We have the operational budget that Melanie just walked you through, with the revenues offsetting the operations, but we also have the trustees' budget. And I have, as you know, November 1st of last year, the county took over the cross insurance arena, and the trustees have come into a advisory committee versus a standalone quasi-governmental group. And so this year, we were assumed the trustees' budget, in which we've done a number of fine-tuning of this budget based on some efficiencies of bringing it under the umbrella of the county. And I'll just run quickly down through. The trustees had a contract administrator for a number of years, and that contract administrator was paid roughly about $57,000 a year. That contract administrator was eliminated in February of this year, and I assumed the role of contract administrator. And so that zeroed out the cost of that line for this current budget year. And in turn, it zeroed out the payroll taxes and benefits for that position. Parking, we pay for parking at the adjacent parking garage for the trustees when they meet on every other month. And so that covers that line. Professional services, we have $20,000 earmarked there. That ranges in dollar amount. Over the years, the cross-insurance arena has been heavily reliant on legal advice. And I think as of today, I don't think, maybe once I've asked for some legal interpretation. So out of that $20,000 is significantly reduced because of the reliance of legal guidance is not necessary anymore. We have board meetings there every other month. That is just a general cost of running those board meetings. Office supplies, we zeroed out as we have assumed that under the county umbrella. Record storage, that was a storage space that we had in a building across the street of Free Street from the center. And a lot of the storage there was moved there when we went through the renovations back in 2011, 2012, and never been touched. And so we were paying monthly storage. Back, I think in January or February of this year, I got the facilities crew here in the courthouse to load up the trucks, and we all headed up there and we purged that storage unit, and we no longer pay a storage fee for it. Because a lot of stuff we threw out, and what we couldn't throw out because of state statute in terms of retainage, we moved into our storage spaces. The employee health insurance, that went away with the elimination of the employee, as I previously stated. One thing that I did add in this budget was the management incentive fees. We have a management contract with Spectra, and Melanie is actually employed by Spectra. She is not employed by Cumberland County. And we have a contract through them. Part of that contract is an incentive fee or a bonus at the end of the year if they meet certain thresholds throughout the year that was previously established back when we first signed on to the management agreement. Just to give you some indication, I think the first year I was here, I think the incentive was around $92,000. Last year, the incentive was $74,000. The trustees just reviewed the incentive at their last meeting in October. Was it September, October? And that incentive fee was $42,000. So it does fluctuate, but it's projected to be on the high side because with hockey coming back to town and with 8 Mammoths games, as Melly pointed out, there was 122 events scheduled for this coming year, or proposed for this coming year. If we're seeing 122 events, if that becomes reality, that's going to trip certain incentives for events. It will also, in turn, trip the goals around food and concession sales. And so what we'll see is probably a much higher incentive paid out this time next year to Spectra for meeting certain benchmarks or goals than what we experienced this year. And so I put a placeholder in when I was creating this budget back in May of $80,000. And I think we'll probably be in that ballpark, if not a little bit more, because of the events and because of the concession sales that we'll see in this coming year. All is good, because if we're putting butts in seats on 122 events, those people are going to be buying concession, they're going to be buying shirts, whatever. All is a benefit to the arena, and in turn, we incentivize that type of activity.
How did you, that started in what, 2000, just the last budget, really? It looks 2017, 2018.
I plugged it in. Historically, that was not plugged in and budgeted, and it was one of those things that just this time of year, it was rolled into the
I mean, they
warrant.
had it, but they didn't budget it? Is that what you're saying?
Not in their budget here.
So at the end of the year,
Indirectly budgeted.
Oh, okay. So there must be like a kind of a classic contract that you put together.
Yes, it's
with-
all template. We run down through, being my first year, running through that, I actually contacted the former compliance manager and said, hey, can you help me, guide me, give me your methodology in going down through this? And we worked together on that, and then Melanie and Chris Lawrence out of the Hartford Arena, we sat down and we talked it through.
So
And
the
we
the
both-
reality is that the higher that is, the better we're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
It's money well spent.
Does it all go you, Mel?
Honey, I wish.
Somehow I didn't think it all did.
So just on the bottom of that is the insurances. And one of the things that we were able to do is gain some efficiencies through the county insurances, and what did we have to have on outside of the county insurances for the cross insurance. And so, as you can see, for those lines, we were able to wrap into the county insurances, like public officials insurance and crime and workers' comp and unemployment. Workers' comp and unemployment went away automatically once we didn't have an employee of the trustees. So we were able to wrap crime and public officials into the county's risk pool, as we still have through the cross insurance, as rightfully named for the cross insurance arena, we still have our larger liability insurance and our auto. We do have a county truck up at the arena that the employees use up there, so we have to hold some insurance on it. So, as you can see, bottom line, what I proposed to the trustees and the commissioners was a budget for the trustees of $179,000. To kind of give you some barometer, just in the 2017-18, we were at $276,000. So we were constantly looking to whittle that down and look at ways of wrapping more into the efficiencies of county government, and I think it's paying off.
I think there's one other thing that I'd want to add in, just in case somebody in your community asks about it. For you folks, you have the misfortune this year of being 1 year shy of the magic date at which the 2012 bond stops increasing. It, from 2018 to 19, the premium went up about $75,000. Starting next year, 2020, it remains basically flat for the next decade, but that's not the 2019 budget. So it's just something that's in there as an increase that's,
When you say flat, you mean at that, with that $75,000 increase this year? Is that it? Where is that in the document?
It would not be in this document, because the bond was actually, it fell onto the county's ledger. So it would be in your budget there.
so if you go to the primary budget book,
Yeah. Cross arena budget,
yep,
bond principal, bond interest.
yep. So you'll see it goes from the bond principal of 1.2 million goes up to 1.3 million. The interest does go down a little bit, but between the two, that's a $75,000 increase. The bond was set up in such a manner that it slowly escalated from really 2012 to next year, going from that 0 to 2.2 million gradually over time. Again, next year, in 2020, it will flatline, but not until then.
So when you're looking at, still staying on that page, when you're looking at bottom line at the percent from prior year, this year it's gonna be 6.61% increase? Is that how I'm reading that? Am I reading that correctly?
6.1% increase.
Is that what that percentage is? Percent from prior year? So from last year to this year, it would go up 6.1%. That's what I'm thinking, which is actually, or is that the,
Where are you seeing this?
right there?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I'm looking for a 6.1%, not.
Are you on
seeing
the, it's right at the
So-
bottom of that
So,
that block of, that says,
I'm seeing how it's
cross-insurance.
responsible for .71. Oh, you're way back here. Okay, got
Yes,
it.
right.
Yeah.
It's all on.
I'm there, I'm almost
Yeah.
there, sorry. Thank you very much.
My question is, what's
Yes.
that gonna look like?
Yeah, I was looking at a different book, sorry.
Yes, right.
Yes, so that's 6.1% is the overall increase in terms of how much the county has to spend.
On cross-insurance.
Correct.
So, my
but
question is,
then going into
next year, yeah,
2020,
what's that figure gonna be? Zero?
it's just going to be,
Yeah, 2020 is that
Flat.
first year that you can actually reasonably start to expect a flat number,
Okay.
because you're not going to have bond
then
issuances.
it goes zero.
making that
for
impossible.
The next,
Yeah, it basically until 2028 is when it starts to go back down a little bit, but we're going to have this bond for a long time to come.
How much longer does the bond go?
The bond expires in 2037.
I'll be expiring before then.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be around for a while.
yeah,
But
I can see if I can watch it.
I will say the really painful years were a few years back where the principal was increasing by $200,000 every year. So every year the finance committee was faced with, boom, here's an extra 200 grand on top of it. And we're almost there. I'm looking forward to that day.
Perhaps Melody can work out some more profit here where we can get that down faster.
I can talk about that $80,000 if
I mean,
I go
well-
in my crystal ball and get all
Yeah.
of it shows, then I can say
Something to
yes to
knock that
that.
down.
There's a lot of positive stuff going on, but that means that she's going into a headwind. And I just want to point out the headwind she's going into there.
I mean, this year. You don't
Yes.
Until 2037.
Hey, at least it's flat, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
right.
right.
Yeah. Well,
all right, anything else for,
no, I really like it actually looks, at least in this budget, Jim, that, that you were able to combine some services here and actually save some administrative dollars on that, moving the trustees, getting this over to this.
this
section.
is the first time
Yeah.
in the history of the finance committee that we've had anything prior to our adjourning for this, so.
I'd probably also say that, you asked earlier about kind of the lines of communication. I think one of the things that I have enjoyed is realizing that the resources go beyond just my walls of being able to utilize county assets or county employees when we've needed to. And so I think one of the things we did this summer, I called it a liquidation sale. Like we had a lot of equipment that just didn't have a home in the arena anymore, and some of it was kitchen stuff that schools could use, or just different things. So I just said, Jim, here's my laundry list of stuff. Can anybody else in the county or even the city, can anybody use it? Schools. So there's a lot of equipment that didn't go to waste that other entities got to use, and even just being able to call him and say, hey, I need an electrician, can I just have your guys come over and take a look get eyes on it? And even small things like a part, we got quoted $1,000. We ended up finding it for $300. So
Yeah.
there's stuff that's just not even documented in here that has just been, it's almost kind of a game now. I'm like, oh my God, my resources feel limitless to me.
That's always an attitude thing, really, when you have people working to kind of see what you can do and
Yes.
knowing that you can do
Yeah.
that. You see $1,000 bill and then all of a sudden a couple phone calls and you've knocked it down 70%. You gotta feel good about that if you're
Yeah,
doing public
absolutely.
business.
So there's, I sent an email today, needing some stuff for some shows, so I got to, I emailed Jim and John, and they see some of the randomness that the job will bring, but, it's definitely, I enjoy the team atmosphere, that's what I grew up with, that's what I know, so to me, they're just an extension of the building. I recognize that my money is the taxpayer money, and I'm an extension of him, but it's also, to me, it's kind of a team mentality that I've really enjoyed over the past couple of months.
It's exactly what we were looking for when we did this too, so it was
Absolutely.
really good.
Can only go up.
Yep. All right, we ready to move on to the
Sure.
sheriff's budget, or?
It's
do you
all right.
have
I'd
other-
like to give Melanie the opportunity to break free, so she.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think she wants to sit around.
I mean, it might be a learning curve over there.
Did you just hear that speech about teamwork?
Yeah.
Thank you.
For some reason, the sheriff's budget may not be the best thing for.
But you're probably right. Although I could go back to my staff and say, you guys better appreciate what we got. No, I'm just kidding.
Would you park in the lot or the garage?
The lot.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you for coming over, Melanie.
Absolutely.
you.
Lovely
Thanks.
meeting you. Yeah, take care, guys. I'll
See ya.
see you.
See ya.
soon.
Here's the next thing. All right. Great, all right, so then we will, as you go through that, send any additional questions to Jim. All right, so then, I had sheriffs out here, and then I started.
The sheriff's office budget is broken up into a number of cost centers. The first cost center, if you want to start and go through, is the administration.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea, there's the administration, there's the law enforcement, and then there's the civil. We've already touched upon the jail. That was at our last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's 3 cost centers to go under the sheriff's office. Admin-wise, under this budget,
Hold on just a minute,
okay?
there's no page numbers on.
Yeah, we
that is
didn't get the page numbers on.
There we go, there's no page numbers.
We
so
will
it's
on the
about-
final document, but not this.
About that much.
About that much. Maybe it's
Towards the
pages next
back.
time.
Yeah, so that's right after,
Sheriff's,
right
law
right
enforcement.
after facilities, yes,
You got Sheriff's admin.
administration, so,
Would that be before
Yep,
law
yep.
enforcement?
yes.
we
There you go, okay, we're with the program.
We've got it.
Under the sheriff's administration,
Oh, my apologies. I didn't realize I had my pager with me at 6 o'clock.
we have 11 positions that are paid for under this budget. I won't go down through, but the different personnel, but it includes the sheriff and the chief deputy, among others. To give you an understanding of where we're falling out, there's, the budget request is $188,299 over. Actually, I'm sorry, $124,901, or 11.4% over what we were working with last year. Really, this is the cost of running the department for the sheriff's office. You'll see the insurances, you'll see your typical office supplies, printing supplies, advertising dues, equipment rental, training, telephone, clothing. It is more of the, I always consider it always the support structure for the next 2 cost centers that we will be going through.
So I have 2 questions. The liability insurance is kind of a bobbed and weaved a little bit there. Now, the adopted was 5,800, and so it's flat for this year. Was that, in previous where it was less, were changes in the rates, or in the activity?
Honestly, that is an allocation as a percentage of the overall amount, which remained relatively flat. Not as much got allocated in the prior year, but we'd like to get that back up to where it should be. But it's the overall county insurance is roughly $400,000, and a pretty large portion of that gets allocated to law enforcement and also the jail, which accounts for over half of it. Obviously, things like finance isn't exactly going to take a big chunk of it,
Right.
but it is very much a percentage of the overall.
The other question I had was telephone and communication. The budget request and then the preliminary are significantly different. And is that due to digital communications and new equipment, or is there something else that's going on?
Well, they just went through a whole new equipment changeover. They had a very dated system. It was a step 2. As you may been aware, the communications EMA was phase 1 of changing over the phone system. The law enforcement center and the jail was phase 2. And so what we saw was that was an opportunity to bring on a new system, an up-to-date system, many more bells and whistles on what they could use their phones for, but it also brought a review of what the phone's needs were, and I think you probably saw this number also includes additional hardware associated with that upgrade.
Right, okay.
Well, one of the, that's something that's occurring in all municipalities everywhere too. You can, you can kind of get lost in a black hole of communication and technology. I'm wondering how you guys go about determining what your needs are and procuring. Do you have a group that, traditionally the way it works is that the department head, or in this case would be the county sheriff, would say this is what we need, but I'm not sure that that's the most efficient way to do things anymore, and I'm just wondering what you guys are looking at on that.
I want to insert one thing just because before we move on from it. The big part of the reason for the change in the sheriff's telephone is that is a move out of the IT budget into the sheriff's budget. A portion of the air cards that go into essentially what enables their iPads and such to have the wireless went out of the IT budget and into there. So you'd see a corresponding decrease in IT. I didn't want us to move past that.
That's a good catch. Thank you.
Right,
And
okay.
that's a theme a lot of times. What we're trying to do this year is start taking IT and facilities seem to be a catch-all for the county for many years, and I'm one that likes to develop a budget. If your cost is this is where it lands. And so we started moving things out of IT and facilities at a lesser extent, but IT mostly, and putting them where they should be in the budget. So it's a true reflection of what a department's costing us versus having IT kind of subsidize. And so that was one line item, and thank you for remembering that.
That's good for keeping it clear, clarification.
Sure.
Still have the same problem though, which is how you actually procure this stuff. And
The procurement was a RFP process. It is not a decision that a department head has. It could be driven by a department head, but the facilities director was the one that kind of oversees the phone systems that we have in the county.
So for everything, all
Everything.
phones.
Yep. And so there was an RFP process. There was a committee that reviewed the different RFPs. As you can imagine, there's all kinds of different ways of skinning a cat on phone systems in today's world. And so it was a pretty long process of them really doing their due diligence, figuring out, do they want to buy the system? Do they want to lease the system? Do they want to do voice over internet? Do they want to do copper? You know, there was a lot of things to take into account. And ultimately, they settled in on a voice over internet system.
And all of that takes into account all areas, all departments, and putting what their need is for that year in, and then the RFP takes care, is addressing all of them together as
Not all
opposed
of
to
them.
individual ones?
We have only gone as far as the communications center and the EMA office, which is downstairs from communications. that complex up in Wyndham, and then we've done the LEC, the Law Enforcement Center, and the jail down. We have not done this building.
So two then.
Two campuses out of 3 or 4. We haven't done,
Are you gonna move toward that in this building? Is that what you-
eventually, yes. We have a little bit newer phone system in this building, so we're okay. It was, those 2 campuses, it was, they had a phone system that it was getting very difficult to, 1, find someone to maintain the phone system, and 2, if they were in need of any parts for the, it was hard to find the parts.
That,
String and tin cans.
might work. Did once upon a time. Well, just, the budget is up 11.4%, and you were saying that part of the change in this is the fact, the philosophy that you're now using, which is the expenses don't land in a generic area like IT, but they now are landing in the area, in the department that's actually.
Who's using it?
Do you have an idea of what percentage of that 11.4% increase is actually pulling it out of somewhere else? So, I mean, is that a true, this isn't, I'll stay with that question first.
You know,
Sure, I can,
oh, go ahead. Because I was just, and I'll just jump in.
Any of these are,
I'll just make mention that the IT budget's down 7.1%.
Yeah, but that would be scattered through all of the.
Correct.
So-
$66,641 got moved out of the IT budget and redistributed
Right.
to the departments.
And would you say you thought a lot of it, $10,000 goes right here, right? I mean, so-
I would say for this budget, it's a $124,000 increase from one year to the next.
Uh-huh.
Of that, about $25,000 of that is IT transfer.
Okay, so it's almost less than a quarter of it. So it's-
And I'm just checking to make sure there wasn't
No,
something else in here that was
Maybe down to
postponed.
8 or 9% increase instead of 11%, which would be more accurate, which is also better, even though it's, it would be more, your whole budget isn't going up that much. It's,
You know, some of the increase, as you saw day one when we started up this process this fall, was that the sheriff's office had a few additions in terms of employees.
yeah.
And those employees were coming in at 6 months, and so if you look at the detail, there's $61,000 in there for,
Is that in this particular budget right here? It's in the administration?
it's in the administration.
Oh, okay, I was
So-
gonna ask, that was gonna be the question I was gonna ask, which is, are the new positions in this?
Yes.
okay.
Yep, there's I cut the 61,000 salary adjustment for command staff, but there is a $70,000 line item for support services administrative sergeant. And that is July 1st. So that 70,000, because I asked for 6 months, is actually in the budget for $35,000.
Okay. Yeah, those positions were, they've already started, that will be.
It will be July 1st, 2019,
19, okay.
which that is,
Just a comment, two comments on that. One has to do with the overtime that I was looking here. And your budget, you're kind of optimistic that your 219 budget request preliminary was 19, you did bring it up to 24. That's your actual request on
No, that was the
overtime?
budget request was 24, but
actually, I cut it.
he
You
cut it to 18,
Well, but if
which
you
is
look,
what it was.
if you look at the last 3 years, the overtime has
it's
been
18.
over the budget every single time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it looks like that probably will happen.
And there has been some staff changeover down in the department, and the redistribution of some of that workload in that staff changeover, I feel will prevent the overage in overtime.
You're thinking the new people, the new positions will help that you are talking about?
The new positions in this budget will not offset the overtime that you see here. It's current backfilling of some positions down there, and the redistribution of some of the workload.
You mentioned in the county budget that, you've got ongoing open positions. That was actually, I think, a difficulty in filling positions. We talked about that before. Is there anything equivalent to that in the sheriff's personnel budget? Do they have trouble getting officers or personnel, or is that, are they okay with that? I know that,
I think that they've been very fortunate that when there is a patrol job out there, position out there, they're able to backfill it rather quickly.
and that's kind of unusual, and based on what's going on around the state and the country, which is, it's been really difficult to get police officers. Do you suppose it's, I'm just speculating, you think that it's because they're county positions and you can draw from a much broader group of towns, that there are more people out there that, in different towns, that want to do it rather than in one town?
You could say that. You could also attribute that I think our red tape in bringing someone on in the law enforcement is not as great as what you would find in some communities that may have somewhat of a civil service process that could take a number of months to have that person go through. We have a more streamlined process.
Yeah.
That we're able to, if I'm coming out of the criminal justice out of SMCC, I'm putting my resume into 5-6 different departments.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be some departments that are going to call me faster than others,
Okay.
just because of their process in-house.
And there isn't a residency requirement, is there?
No.
You don't need to live in Cumberland County to serve.
One thing that I've really heard a lot from the law enforcement is there is a great deal of autonomy that the deputies have by the very nature of the position. They're spread out all throughout the county, and they're very much sort of on their own island. And for a lot of them, that's an enormous benefit to the job, is that they have that freedom for their own decision-making, and they're less constricted. And that seems to be one of the reasons why the county does tend to be sort of top pick for a lot of these folks. I will say one thing, your question about the overtime, it does show up in the sheriff's patrol budget, which is the next one, just a little bit. You'll notice that year over year, typically the full-time wages comes in a little under budget and the overtime comes in a little over budget. And that is the impact of them occasionally being down a position or so for periods of time. But it, generally speaking, isn't something where they're chronically down all the time like the jail is. It happens, but on a lesser extent than what we often see in communications or at the jail, where they're almost always open shifts.
I think we talked about this. The CALEA certification is required to house federal, or
No, that is PREA certification, and also another jail certification whose acronym I'm forgetting.
Okay,
But
right.
those two are absolutely required.
Okay.
The CALEA certification is more of a general sheriff's,
It's law enforcement.
law
Yeah,
enforcement,
fine.
right, yes. I mean, I'm familiar with CALEA, but I was unsure if that was, if there was any requirement for that, or if it's just good business practice.
It's good business practice.
Jim, what is an administrative, I was just looking at personnel, what is an administrative investigator? Is that an actual criminal investigator? I mean, is a person investigates crime, or is this something in-house?
It's an investigator that, we have 2 investigators, and I'm going to flip. We have an administrative investigator, and we have the investigations clerk. The administrative investigator is doing things internal investigations, whether it's at the law enforcement office, whether it's in the jail. They do a lot of
So in-house investigation?
in-house.
Watching stuff. Do you have any investigators in the sheriff's department?
Yes. Yeah, we have
Criminal
11. It's
One of the-
our CID, and we have 11 personnel in there. They would not be
okay.
under the administration side of things.
Okay.
They'd be in patrol.
They're in the patrol side? Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering where they were. Okay.
All right.
You want to move on to the patrol?
Yes, yes.
Patrol law enforcement, we have 43 full-time equivalents. Under the grants and contracts, and when I say grants and contracts, that is contracts with our communities throughout the Cumberland County, for instance, Standish, Harpswell, Gray, to name a few. And we have an additional 15 there. So we have 58 personnel within this, made up of, in this budget, 2 captains are charged off, 4 lieutenants, 7 sergeants, a total of 35 deputies, 9 detectives, 1 complaint officer, and 1 crimes analyst. This budget is up 3.9%, as Alex pointed out. The overtime is usually running a little higher here, but we typically offset that overtime with a savings in the wage line.
One line item here that you'll see that has a $25,000 increase that we just, I'm hoping that's adequate, is the gas. We're budgeting $2.60 for the coming year. That's based off of what I've sort of been looking at and running the various reports on it for 2019. Which was actually lower than I thought. Now, that's, again, $2.60 without any taxes, so obviously significantly lower than you'd see at the pump. We are able, through our WEX card program, to get onto the state pricing structure. So that $2.60 looks like what the various projections are. As I look at fuel prices right now, I'm feeling a little worried, but it's best to trust in the folks that have come up with that.
You don't participate in a contractual program?
Sort of.
We don't bid out for our gas and because we don't have a fueling island.
And the city can't help you out on that in any way?
No, if you, as Alex just said, a lot of the attraction to being a deputy is to have the ability to be out in the county by yourself.
So you go to any gas station you want?
Exactly. There's no one central location.
One of the things I might suggest, just as a thought, is that you actually communicate with the towns in the county, and they all have a bid. They all do bids. They all get a contract. And what I found is that you may be able to piggyback onto that just by asking, because you're county government,
Not bad.
and they keep it. So.
Sure, and two responses there. For some of the communities that we are doing the patrol contracts, and I will forget which is which, for a bunch of them, the deputies do in fact just gas up at the individual town. And so there's nothing passing through us at all. That's straight up on the town. The other thing is all of our deputies use something called WEX cards through WEX Company, and they're going off of, they get sort of the WEX rate, which is tied to the state rate when they fill up at there. So anytime they fill up at the pump, they're not paying pump price. Which is why I can put in that $2.60. It actually works pretty well, and that's a program we run on our end, sort of keep track of who's using what and where. So those two pieces help there.
Yeah, so you are getting at least some sort of discount on you.
Oh, absolutely.
And we're not paying taxes on it.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, no municipality does anyway.
So, I highlighted something here somewhere, and flipping through, I noticed the canine line doubled. Is it $10,000 for a dog?
It is.
That's okay, with training and with all.
Not cheaper than a deputy.
One dog.
It is, right? Yeah. So, And so the boarding, okay, all right, I just wanted to clarify that I highlighted it because I wasn't clear on it.
As a side note regarding the dog is named Vegas. And so when we do our treasurer's warrant, it typically trips up whoever the commissioner is, because they'll see in the description, Vegas this and Vegas that. My staff has actually started to enjoy it, and I've started to notice this when I approve invoices, that any chance they get to include the name Vegas, they do it because they find it funny. So if you've all signed those treasurer's warrants and sort of spun through, like,
Nice.
thought you'd enjoy that.
Yeah.
This budget does have one patrol deputy, effective July of 2019, at a cost of $41,845. It also has a increase in detective on-call stipends from $150 to $400, at an increase of $13,000 to the budget. And then there's a detective stipend for the 10 detectives at 15 cents an hour, which is about $3,100.
And was that union-based, or was that?
This was a side letter that we're working on with the unit.
Where is that? Where's that position? I'm just in,
It is,
one deputy, I found it.
okay.
Yep, sorry. That's a full-time position?
It is a full-time position, but only funded for 6 months thus far. It's a
Oh, so
July.
41 is half of
Yeah,
that.
it's a July 1st. If we're not able to bring in a blue pin, which blue pin is a officer who's already trained through the Criminal Justice Academy,
Yeah.
we will be able to hit the August Criminal Justice Academy by that hire.
Now, when you say you went on call from 150 to 400, is that a week? Week at a whack, or?
It is a week at a whack, yeah.
So 400, so on-call's gone from 150 a week to 400 a week? That's a nice little
Yes. They're,
raise.
the detectives are very busy in the county. It's
On-call, you mean?
on-call.
But they also get, whenever they get called, they're,
Yes, they get their time and a half if it's over 40.
yeah. It's, that's still a really good, that's still a really good,
It is. Oh, we're seeing them in the field quite a bit. They're showing up.
but their time is actually paid for when they're actually called. It's the on-call is if you don't get any calls at all.
Very seldom can they get through the week without being called.
Not
I'm
being
sure.
called.
It's a
No,
very-
there's a lot going on.
It's a very busy, dynamic county, and I see a lot of the reports coming through. Many times they're weekend or nighttime, they're pumping 2 or 3 different press releases out.
They have more than one on call?
No,
Just one?
just one. If it's an incident that requires additional, they will call others in, but there's only one on call at a time.
Can you explain the, so I'm under criminal investigation still. The, everything makes sense except the buy money in quotes for investigation. What does that mean?
You know, they ought to take that out. I haven't seen them actually spend any money out of that particular line item since I've been here.
Oh, okay.
But they do it, technically, if it did
Yeah,
occur, it would need to go pass through me for that to go out the door. I've never actually seen it. One of the interesting things that occurs is they do maintain a small, separate, essentially petty cash account that is specifically for this. So if it ever needed to get replenished, because it, got run dry, they took out the buy money and were not able to recoup it, then conceivably that would occur. What I've seen all the time, though, since then, is that has never actually been needed. So it's one of those, yeah. I really hope I didn't just jinx us there.
all right. Okay, I did not highlight anything else, did you,
No.
in this? Okay, all right.
I like the fact that it's,
One of the larger expenses in the budget is the replacement of vehicles. There's $405,000 in this budget, which is up just $2,000 over the, or $4,000 over the current budget. But with the fleet that we have and spread out throughout the county and the miles that get put on these vehicles is just phenomenal. It's unfortunate that we have to replace them as fast as we do. But there are 9 vehicles in this budget, and depending upon what is in the contract towns, there could be many more vehicles, but those are all charged off to the contract towns.
so how often do you actually replace these things?
We replace them probably every 2 to 3 years, and it kind of rolls downhill.
Yeah.
So we might take them off the front line, but they'll still be kicking around maybe in the detectives or civil, or they'll be used for backup. The ones that we actually send off to auction, those are pretty much spent. We usually kick them right to the dirt.
How long does that take to do that?
I would say probably 4, 5, 6 years to get to auction. Yeah, the ones that we just sent out to auction this year were kind of our remaining Crown Vics, and we've been trying to get the Crown Vics off from the road because Ford no longer makes the Crown Vic.
Oh, so what are you using now? I can't remember.
We got Tahoes.
Tahoe. Oh, yeah, those are nice. I like those.
Yeah. And there's lots of room for equipment and everything
Lots of
else.
room, it's, the suspension,
It's a nice ride. They're much
traveling
better
around
ride.
the cities, you get good roads during the wintertime, traveling around the back roads of the county, you need that extra little oomph in a vehicle.
Yes, you
Yeah.
do.
Oh, geez.
That's a transition the county had really started before either Jim and I even started, which made my day when I started here to see. I didn't have to fight that fight to get them away from Crown Vics. But
Yeah, no, I think the Tahoes are,
What I would say, from my perspective, is that this whole budget of 3.9% increase, that's a good solid number. I wish the whole budget looked like that, just that kind of an increase. So, and these are people that are out there doing the work, right out, frontline stuff. So I feel really comfortable with this particular budget in this particular area.
Shall we move on to the last cost center? And that is the civil division. This division actually serves people papers, and they travel throughout the county. They serve approximately 10,000 papers a year. They have 4 full-time and 5 enterprise. And the enterprise are what money comes in, pays, there's the expense meets up with the revenue. Here we have the 2019 preliminary budget is up just over $11,000, or 3.4%. It's a large percentage increase because it's a small budget of just over $337,000. Not a lot of changes other than the wages and salaries. Everything pretty much stayed flat throughout this budget. I think it was just the loan salaries going from $199 to $204, and then the associated benefits to that account for the increase of the $11,000.
one aspect of work that needed to occur with this, which really went into effect middle of last year, revenues for this particular department have been on the decline for a few years now. And so mid-part of last year, to sort of get that back up to where it needs to be, they changed the pay structure that people were getting paid out for these a little bit, increased the rates, and that sort of arrested the flow a little bit, got 2017 closer to where it needs to be, and thus far, 2018 is on pace to actually hit that 277 revenue number. So thus it didn't get changed for the next year. We were concerned we might have to decrease that revenue number. If you look at the cover page for the civil division, you'll see that like the 15, 16, and 17 actuals, and then the 2019 budget, which is flat with the prior year. But I just thought I'd raise that if people were looking at it and saying, hey, they haven't really made their revenue number. We kept it flat because we do appear to have fixed that problem.
Now, on the revenue, what is the revenue source?
It's the fees they collect for serving those papers.
No, just a rough calculation. If you serve 10,000 papers and you spend 337,000, that's $33 a paper.
Oh, I should know the answer to this, and I don't.
Well, close.
No, yeah.
It's $33.76, roughly. I mean, 10,000, you divide it by, but anyway, is that how you calculate what to charge those things, or how do you charge how do you determine the cost of what you're going to charge people to deliver those papers?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different sort of rates that go into it.
What it is that you're delivering?
Yes, exactly. And I'd have to I don't have the fee schedule
Okay, that's all right.
set in my head, but no, there is, yeah.
I just did all 10,000 and the whole budget.
Yeah, and it tends to go from the very expensive down to, the same as any other sort of delivery. There's
Is that how you produce the revenue sources, by what you're going to actually pull in? So in theory, it's supposed to balance itself out in theory, but you don't collect all the time from people who you serve. Is that why?
We don't collect from people we serve.
Serve.
They're on the recipient, they're recipients of the bad news typically.
So you
So we collect from law offices, the courts.
people who serve, do the serving.
Right. This year, we're budgeting $277,000 in revenue
Okay.
for the civil process,
And so that's 277, that's $70,000.
which is flat compared to last year. It's totally a crystal ball on
Right.
this, because who knows what is
Experience
going to be
of-
taking place.
It used to be up around 300,000 a few years ago. The interesting thing about this particular revenue source is during really good economic times, this is a revenue source that tends to not do well. During very bad economic times, this revenue source does very well.
So we want to do really poorly.
Just
And we'll
sort
take
of
it
is
as
what it
is.
is.
For the greater good.
As is good with me, as long as we're balancing out revenues and expenditures. And the economy's still good.
And so, for example, 2010 was a very strong year for civil because that was the height of the recession. It's yeah.
Right. Anything else for the sheriffs? We've been through the 3 cost centers.
Yeah, and we've touched upon the jail already, so that takes care of that entire campus down there.
All right, so then at our next meeting on the 5th, we'll talk about the general county budget, not the ones that we've discussed so far. And then, hopefully Jessica will be able to. So if, so if you can send this package to Jessica, did you talk at all about the cross insurance arena with her?
No, I did
No,
not.
okay.
She was on that email that, I sent all of you this package
Yes,
via
yes,
email,
right,
and she was
uh-huh.
on that email.
Okay, so then maybe just a little follow-up for her to read it. If there are any questions, that you can send those
Absolutely.
to Melanie, and she can get that answer. All right. Anything else for this evening?
All set?
You want to make a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second that. All those
Okay, all in favor?
All right, great.
Okay.
So then we'll be back here on the, thank you very much all, and
Yeah.
we'll be back